Today, on A Word on Westerns, Lee Purcell.
So we just talked, and we talked about everything, about our childhoods, about life, about fast cars, because I wanted one. I couldn't afford it. He had a lot of fast cars. Motorcycles, because I rode a motorcycle also. And we talked about different motorcycles, and we talked about acting and life, and we had, strangely enough, me from nowhere and Steve McQueen had a lot in common.
Welcome to A Word on Westerns, where we talk to the greatest Western creators of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Hi, I'm RJ Word, and welcome to A Word on Westerns. This is my dad.
Hi, Rob Word. I'll be your dad today and every day.
That's really very kind of you. That's very generous. You'll be my dad today, but also our guest today is Lee Purcell, who taught Kenny Rogers how to read a script.
And she's going to tell us all about it today. Lee Purcell is an ageless beauty, an actress who has worked since she first came to town, and she was mentored by Steve McQueen.
That's a cool mentor.
Well, it's a cool story she's going to tell everybody, too, about how that happened. But her Westerns, including a BONAZA episode that she did with Richard Thomas, and a feature film, Dirty Little Billy, about Billy the Kid, that is going to put a really different spin on your perception of Billy the Kid. The movie came and went pretty quickly, but since that time, it has become a must-see cult movie. Michael J. Pollard is stunning as a kind of a stupid Billy the Kid. And another Western she did with Dennis Hopper called Kid Blue. And that is a film that introduced her to Warren Oates, to Ben Johnson, and some of the most popular and wonderful character actors working in Westerns.
She was also in The Gambler, which is where she met Kenny Rogers and taught him how to read that script.
Our pal Boxleitner's in The Gambler, too. He played Billy, kind of the comedy relief in those, but he was the real connection to Westerns that Kenny Rogers was looking to. They based The Gambler movie on Kenny Rogers' hit song, and the script was written by Jim Burns, who created these different characters. The film was such a success that it launched a sequel and another sequel and another sequel. I think all together there were 5 Gambler miniseries, and they are still so much fun. But Lee Purcell, the beautiful Lee, was in the very first one and talks about how she did teach Kenny Rogers about movies, TVs, and what a script was, and to not read stage directions.
Lee was a charming guest and was another cast member in our Ladies from Lonesome, available on YouTube.
You know, what was so great is when I announced that we had found this script, Lee was in the audience at the Autry, and I said, we could probably cast that here. Does anybody want to be in it? Before I could blink, Lee was up on the stage, first in line to get in this. She works all the time still. She does live theater. She also does radio show recreations. In fact, she played Miss Kitty in a radio show recreation, and not only does she act in those, but she produces them as well. I know you're going to want to hear what she has to say about all of her work in the Western genre, so I think let's get to it right now. Here's Lee Purcell. We love Westerns and the leading ladies, and we have a leading lady today who's been nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. She looks lovely. She's going to come in here. Her hair, her coif is just right, and we want to give her a big hand. Lee Purcell, come on in.
touch my
So
hair.
lovely.
Don't touch my hair.
Sounds like Madeline Kahn, not my hair.
First it will start sticking up again.
Well, let's talk about your Westerns. And Stan Dragati,
Yes.
who was the director of Jack L. Warner's last feature film. This is a man whose career started in the silent days.
He was old to come out of retirement to produce Dirty Little Billy.
And Jack had already sold Warner Brothers at this time. This was a Columbia release.
Was it?
Yes.
I don't even remember.
Yes.
It's,
No, but it was the last film he ever produced.
it was the last film he ever produced. So I got to know Jack Warner quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a good mentor to me. And I remember when I went to, there was a big party at the Bistro, which was in LA at the time, was a very hot restaurant. Everything happened there, right? And he supervised my hair, my makeup. He was old school. He was from that era. And what I was wearing.
So that film was way ahead of its time.
It was.
It was Deadwood before Deadwood. It was the muddy streets and the great costumes and the characters who were questionable. They weren't your typical Durango kid, B-Western heroes.
No, there were no white hats.
They were all muddy. They might have been white to begin with.
Maybe.
So Dirty Little Billy, that's the film with Michael J. Pollard as Billy the Kid.
And Richard Evans as Goldie. And I played the 13-year-old prostitute, Burl.
How did you research that?
You're quick. You're so quick. Oh my God. Actually, if you really want to know how to research, sure. So Burl was a composite of several real women that had been in Billy's life. And she was an orphan who there was nothing else she could do but turn to prostitution. And at 13, that's what she did.
Mm-hmm.
So how did I research it? I did a lot of different kinds of research, but remember at that time, there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called the library.
It's a Dewey Decimal System.
It was a place we used to go where there were actually books and you would read, and then you would call people on the telephone and you would find out things. And so there was a photographer, he was very famous back in the 1880s or 90s, I guess. And he did a book on Storyville. And Storyville was, or I haven't thought about this in years. I still have the book. Storyville was, does anybody know where Storyville was? I can't, Kansas or, anyway, I did research on the prostitutes in Storyville, which was a real place. And this was a book of real photographs of women from that time period who were prostitutes. And it was the same time period as when Billy the Kid lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then also there were other photographs that I studied because there was no video of, from that period.
Mm-hmm.
There were other photographs I've studied of prostitutes from that era in New Orleans. So I kind of did a city study and a rural study.
What was your character's relationship with Billy the Kid?
Well, her relationship was really with two of them. There was a movie that starred three people, right?
Richard Evans.
Richard Evans
was Goldie.
He was Goldie. He passed away about 2 years ago. We remained friends all our lives. And then Michael, and it was incredible character actors. It was Gary Busey's first film.
Big Nolte's first film too, I think, wasn't it?
He wasn't in it, as far as I know. Who did he play?
Nick Nolte and Ed Lauder made their film debuts.
Well, Ed and Gary. I don't recall Nick Nolte being in it. Sorry. Maybe you
probably had too much mud on his face and you wouldn't recognize it.
I don't know, but I don't recall him being in it. But Gary was in it, a very memorable scene. Ed Lauder was great in it, just great. There was just wonderful character.
I think I know who the mother was. She was in Ozana's Raid, Dran Hamilton.
Dran Hamilton.
Boy,
I loved her.
What a fine actor.
She did a beautiful Irish accent because they were supposed to be immigrants, and as a lot of people were at that time, because Stan wanted it to be very historically accurate. And that's why we were all so dirty, was because it was hard to clean yourself in those days. And the streets were, mud.
The characterization that Stan gave Billy was almost like moronic. His
Well, he
character.
wasn't a bright person, Billy the Kid. He wasn't. And that's the way Michael played everything. And Stan wanted that. He wanted Billy to not be, the hero or the anti-hero. He wanted to see the beginning of how he became a killer.
It was certainly different from Paul Newman's Billy the Kid or Robert Taylor.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's.
Or Clu Gulager.
Or Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan was closer.
He was closer. But Stan really wanted him to be what his research had turned up that Billy the Kid actually was, which was he was not that bright.
Hold it!
My gun, you little...
Shoot him, Bill! Shoot it! Shoot him, kid! Shoot him, kid! Shoot him! He ain't shooting nobody. He's scared!
The real Billy the Kid wasn't big or tough or brave. He was a punk.
He was abused. He was a fish out of water. He was a city kid that they had brought to the Old West. He had a mean stepfather. No excuse for what he did. But he wanted to depict him in the way that he thought he actually was. And I know that when Jack Warner saw the movie, and he was on set, I have great photographs of Jack being on set, and he was quite elderly at the time, but he had come out of retirement to do this movie. He had been retired for years, and his response was too dark for the drive-ins.
He's probably right.
He was right. It wasn't. It wasn't.
No, it was ahead of its time.
It was way ahead of its time. Way ahead of it. And we were in Arizona for months.
Old Tucson and Mescal.
Yeah,
right?
and we were there for such a long time. And so everybody brought their families. And
So it must have had a decent budget then. Jack Warner's last film, it wouldn't have been
wasn't
this minuscule budget.
No, it was a big movie.
Yeah.
So it was, I think, we used to arrive every morning and going to makeup to get the dirt put on. I'm not joking. And they would blacken my teeth and just put dirt on my face and grease in my hair. So
That prostitute's not going to make any money at all.
She didn't do too well. But the men were also very dirty. So
Jack Warner visiting the set on his last movie, you said you had a nice relationship with him. So
I did.
How did that develop? Why did he take you under his wing, sort of?
He liked me. And he could never remember my name. And he
was confusing you with that 13-year-old prostitute.
I don't think so. He was quite elderly, but he just liked me, and because he was old school, he was used to, grooming female movie stars, and he would criticize. I was in his office one day, and he said, he was this gruff old man. And he said, "Why you dress like a boy?" I said, and it was the style, right? Jeans and, a blue work shirt. That's how everybody dressed. And I said, "But why? This is how everybody dress. You should dress like a girl." And I thought, okay, well, he wanted me to wear frills and, lacy dresses. And it's like, that wasn't the style. But he was from another era.
Sure, the golden age of Hollywood.
The whole golden age of Hollywood. And he wanted me to look like one of his movie stars, right? But nobody did.
Your first film, you had a starring role with Michael Douglas in Adam at 6 a.m., which was a movie about, so typical of the era, where a guy wants to chuck it all and go live on the land. And so that's what he did. And he falls in love with you as he's working as a manual laborer.
It's definitely not a Western.
No, but it was produced by a guy associated with Westerns,
Yes,
Steve
it was.
McQueen.
Steve McQueen. It was for his company.
Yeah, Solar.
Yeah.
We just talked, I had a guest and we talked about Junior Bonner, which was a film we did right after this too.
Right.
Did you go on location at all when they were shooting that? Did you visit Prescott?
No, I was living in Europe. I didn't even live in this country. After that, I moved pretty quickly.
How did you first meet Steve?
Through a series of 5 very grueling auditions. I had, there was about 500 girls.
For Adam at 6 a.m.?
Yes. Michael had not been hired. And they were just looking for the girl. And I don't know why they did it in that order, because that isn't typical, but that's what Steve wanted to do. I'm not quite sure why. Never asked him. So they had like a countrywide talent search and looked at, auditioned 500 young actresses. And then they kept narrowing it down. So every time I would get another audition, it was like, thank you, because it was a culling process. It was like, which of the rabbits are you going to choose in the pet store? And so it got down, it kept going down. And then one day I got a call from the office, because I had been at the office so much over the period of months, which is in Studio City. I always call it my lucky building. And it's now the Art Directors Guild, but it was Steve's office. And it was across from where Dupar's used to be. And now it's Sephora. And whatever. And so I got a call on a Saturday morning, and I was out gardening in my little plot. And they said, oh, can you come over to the office? And it was like, I was dirty. I was sweaty. And I said, yeah, sure. Can I come over in about an hour? They said, no, you have to come now. In fact, you have to be here in 10 minutes. And I was like, well, I thought to myself, oh, they probably want me to pick up some more sides, right? Because they kept giving me different audition pieces. And I knew I had another audition coming up, number 3 or 4, I don't remember. And they said, yeah, just come over however you are. It doesn't matter. I thought, I'm just going to run in real fast. And I'm going to run up the stairs, and I'm going to pick the sides off the desk like I always do. And then I'm going to run out. Nobody will see me. It's great, And so I drove my old beater car over there and got there, and then, ran up the stairs and opened the door, and there was Steve McQueen. It was like, oh, crap. And he was standing there at the top of the stairs, and he said, hi, I'm Steve. And I said, I know. And Lee, and he said, yeah, well, let's talk. So that was how we met. And we went back to his office, and we talked for like 3 hours. And it was great. It was great. I remember I thought he was old. He was probably 40. And he was of my parents' generation. And I hadn't seen that many of his movies.
Had you not seen Wanted Dead or Alive?
No. No, I had seen Bullet. And that was it.
That's a good one to see, though.
Okay, it's a good one. Still is.
Yeah.
But he was the biggest movie star in the world at that time. And so we just talked, and we talked about everything, about our childhoods, about life, about fast cars, because I wanted one. I couldn't afford it. He had a lot of fast cars. Motorcycles, because I rode a motorcycle also. And we talked about different motorcycles, and we talked about acting and life, and we had, strangely enough, me from nowhere and Steve McQueen had a lot in common. And it was very interesting. And so I left and went and did my next audition, which I don't remember.
Did you clean up and change clothes?
No. What I did do was went home, and I took a pair of scissors and I cut bangs, just chopped them right off, because I thought it was a good idea. And I had really long blonde hair at the time, right? And it was straight, parted in the middle like everybody's was at that time period. Then we had the final screen test, which was done at Disney Ranch. And there were 5 of us jammed into the car. They took all the actresses out at the same time in a car. And well, one of them was a friend of mine. And it was very odd and very awkward. And, but we made it through. And then there were no dressing rooms. We were sitting on a log, in between scenes. You would do your turn and then you go sit on a log. So, and it was not a low budget movie, but I guess the auditions were really low budget. So, and then I got the call that I got the job. I don't know who called, my agent, I guess. I actually didn't have an agent. I didn't have a theatrical agent. I had a commercial agent. That's a whole other story. And then the next call was Steve. And that's when he started mentoring me. And
mentoring, how did he do that?
Oh, I would go to his office. We would have long discussions. We would work out, because he thought I was very skinny at the time, and he wanted me to gain weight, but he didn't want me to gain it in the wrong way. He wanted me to gain muscle. And so he would teach me exercises. And so I would be working out with Steve McQueen in his office. It's like so strange, surreal. And I never asked him, how do you know all this? Because he was fit, very fit. And I finally, towards the end, I did say to him, every time I come here, you show me a different exercise. How do you know all these exercises? And he said, there's this really great Chinese martial arts guy. And he helps me keep in shape. So then years later, because I'm in a lot of books about Steve, and this interviewer I was telling him this story, and he said, do you know who that was? The Chinese martial arts guy? I said, no. And he said, it was Bruce Lee. And it was like, oh my gosh, I guess I was trained by Bruce Lee through osmosis, one removed.
After Adam at 6 a.m. that you did for Steve's company, and he was a silent producer. It was his company, but he didn't get a credit on screen.
No, he didn't want one.
But how hands-on was he?
He was very hands-on. He was, yeah. I mean, we were shooting in Missouri and he was in LA, but all the dailies were flown out to him. He would give his comments and then we would be told, the comments. And so he was long distance hands-on.
After Adam at 6 a.m., you did a Bonanza episode with Richard Thomas, too, an early Bonanza episode.
Yes, that's right.
Too. And it's kind of a romantic...
well, he was accused of raping me, I guess, if you call that.
Really? Okay, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I don't think it's...
your prostitution role,
got reversed.
Premonition of that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was after I did Adam. I thought it was a few years.
Well, according to IMDb, and we don't know how accurate that is a lot of the time, but it's the source to go to.
Okay.
And it had the weirdest title, The Weary Willies.
I'll tell you what that was.
Oh, okay.
Because I actually know. That was what because Richard, who is still a very good friend of mine, Richard played a Civil War veteran who was kind of lost. The name for these types of men at the time was the Weary Willies.
The post-Civil War
Post-Civil War veterans. And they were young men. They were, a lot of them ended up doing cattle drives and having, proper professions. But a lot of them they were, obviously,
vagabonds.
they were vagabonds. And obviously they had some form of, PTSD. And I mean, there's been no worse war than that war. And wandered the country, just wandered and dressed up in their old beat up uniforms. So Richard played one of them. And I was the young girl. And what's his name? Played my father.
Lonnie Chapman.
Yeah, Lonnie Chapman.
What a fine actor.
What a fine actor. And there's a theater here named, after Lonnie. The Lonnie Chapman Theater's over in the Valley. And it was great but I always laugh at it because when Richard and I always laugh about this because Richard was wearing a platinum blonde wig. And we don't know why. And I had my bleach blonde, long hair, and my double false eyelashes. It was so accurate, they were really...
It was Bonanza.
They were really into actors.
So did Michael Landon and Dan Blocker, were they involved in the storyline that you had scenes with them?
I remember working with Michael, and I remember working with the dad.
Lauren Green.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. Lauren Green. I remember working with Lauren Green. I think Dan may have been ill because I'm not sure he was in the episode. I think this was...
Well, this was the 12th season, and it ran for another full season and then a half season when he died.
Okay.
So he might have been...
I think he was already ill, but I'm not entirely sure. But I don't remember him being around.
Another Western you did, which spawned a series of wonderful movies, the terrific film based on a song written by Kenny Rogers.
Yes.
The script written by Jim Burns and somebody else, but Bruce Boxleitner's in that too. Oh boy.
Where's Bruce?
Oh, I'm sorry. Wake up. Somebody wake Boxleitner up.
Wake up.
Oh, shucks.
So that was kind of exciting to be in that major hit, too. What did you think when they said, well, it's a movie based on this song?
I thought it was the oddest thing I'd ever heard of. But that had happened before in film history. And that's not the first time that's ever happened. So I was a big fan of Kenny's already. And but I hadn't, of course, met him, and there was no audition or anything. But I was graced because I got to meet my good friend Bruce Boxleitner. And we have had a very long history since then of different things. We rodeoed together for several years on the Ben Jonson Pro Celebrity Rodeo circuit. And we also had a cowboy poetry and music, the Green River Roping and Recite Preservation Society players try to say that in one breath.
The Gambler took you back to Old Tucson and Mescal.
It did. I've spent a lot of time in Old Tucson. Yeah. It was great. It was fun. It was a really fun time. I got to teach Kenny how to read a script.
Oh, right. He had not acted.
No, he didn't know how to read a script. So one day he came to me and he said, can I talk to you for a minute? I'm like, yeah, sure, And he said, and he had his script with him. So I just want to ask you a few questions. And I said, sure. This is the nicest guy in the world. And he said, so, what of these lines do I say? Because he had never read a script, remember? And I said, well, you say wherever it says, what was his name, Brady? Brady. I said, where it says Brady, don't say Brady, but where below Brady, say the line below Brady. And he was like, oh, okay. And I said, but don't say Brady walks out the door.
These are good tips.
This is the acting 101, right? And so I went through the whole script with him and showed him where he spoke, in dialogue. And he was quick. Oh, he's quick. And then I asked him a question. I said, so he said, do I have to memorize these lines of dialogue? And I said, yeah, you do. I said, but remember, 500 songs by heart? This will be nothing for you. And it was nothing. Once he knew what to say, and then he just picked it up.
It's a charming movie. It's so much fun. And then the ratings were so high, they ended up making several more.
They did, without me.
What fun. Did your character die in that? I don't remember.
I don't know what happened to her. Actually, I got pregnant. I had a baby and in life. And so that kind of was that, But the really fun part to me was I got to learn card tricks. And you don't really see many of them in the film, which is too bad. But Steve Stevens, remember Steve Stevens? So he was hired by, I think he was a friend of Jim Burns, and I'm actually Facebook friends with Jim Burns and his wife. And he taught me card tricks because she was supposed to be this female card shark. And although I don't think you really got that much from the movie, but so I learned how to do all the spreads and shuffle one hand and tricks. And that was really great. I love that part.
What was it like working with Bruce Boxleitner?
Let me tell you some gossip about Bruce Boxleitner.
We want to hear.
I don't know that you want to hear this. Yeah. It's pretty shocking. He's like the nicest guy in the world.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry.
Well, okay, we don't want to embarrass him too much. Well, maybe a little.
A little. I don't mind embarrassing Bruce. I've spent years embarrassing Bruce.
Well, that was a fun movie, and you did another one with a fabulous cast. Kid Blue,
yes.
Dennis Hopper and Ben Jonson, Warren Oates, and probably a couple of other people I can't remember.
Oh, like Ralph Waite.
Ralph Waite, yes.
Howard Hesseman.
Howard Hesseman, right.
And Janice Rule. That was a tremendous, that's really an amazing cast. And that was for 20th Century Fox. And I played, the young wife of Warren and then the lover of Dennis. And I remember being over at 20th and I had auditioned for it. And the director, we were standing out on that street there in the New York set. And the director said, "Great job, but you're far too young for this." And I literally stood in the middle of the street and begged for the role.
Well, I'm glad you got it.
And I did. Yeah. And he was like, "Really? You think you can do old enough?" And I went, "Yeah, I think I can do that. I can do that."
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the role. And then we took off again, I was living in London. And so I had flown back here to audition for that and a few other things. And then went back to London. And when I got to London, got a call. There's no internet. I got a call. You got the role and you have to be in Durango in it was like a week. So I had to fly back, and then it was very difficult in those days to get to Durango from London. It was very difficult.
Probably still is.
It probably is difficult to get to Durango from anywhere, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent about 3 months there.
Well, Dennis had already made a huge name for himself
Yes.
with Easy Rider
Yes.
and a long, interesting acting career.
Yes, very.
So as he was hired as an actor in this, did he have much input in the style and the look of the film?
He had a lot to say.
Mm-hmm. Like what?
Just, he had a lot to say. He wanted it to be accurate. That's what he wanted.
Right, it's a fun film.
It's a fun film.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fun film. But the cast is so good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where I met Ben Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
whom I ended up rodeoing with Bruce for,
Mm-hmm.
years later. And that was really fun.
He was one step ahead of the posse and 100 years ahead of his time.
Really, it was just a fun, wonderful cast. I love Warren, love Dennis, love Ben, love Janice. They were all, I'm sad. they're all
With
gone.
Warren, you're playing his wife in this, and everybody talks about what a wonderful guy he was. What was he like off-set?
Oh, he was the best.
Mhm.
He was just such a kind-hearted person. Brilliant, brilliant actor. I still have a shirt that he bought me all those years ago. Sometimes I wear it. It's like a Mexican shirt. And then one day he came to me and he said, "You have the worst looking script binder I've ever seen." Because I'd use it, the same script binder on everything I'd done. And it was just falling apart, right? And I said, "Well, I don't think it's so bad." And he said, "I do, and here's your new one." So then he took my script, took it apart, and put it in the new script binder. And it's probably still in that same binder.
Nice.
Yeah, he was a really good person who
The camera sure loved him. And I know you're doing radio recreations, and you played Miss Kitty in a Gunsmoke.
I did. Yeah.
How did that come about?
Kind of interesting. My partner, Michael Carnegie, my producing partner, and I, we have a production company called Two Fat Dogs Entertainment.
Do you have two fat dogs?
Well, he has one and I have the other. And we were searching for a name. It was like, "Hey, you got a fat dog, I got a fat dog. Let's
Two fat dogs.
Two Fat Dogs Entertainment," right? So it started during the pandemic because nobody could work. And we were doing recreations of classic radio plays from the golden age of radio, which we are obsessed with. And we started doing these plays, and we have them posted. People can see it on our YouTube channel, Hollywood Radio Players, or they can go to our website, HollywoodRadioPlayers.com. And we have done 2 Westerns.
What was the other?
The Bad Man, which I am not in. I just produced it with Michael, and because we produce all of them then together. And we have a great group of people to draw from. And one is, so yeah, we did Gunsmoke, and Michael played Marshall Dillon, and I played Miss Kitty. I was so much fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we had such a good
Well, the
time.
people who did those old radio shows at the time loved them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they just, because you could wear that funny outfit that you wore for to meet Steve McQueen. You could wear that on radio and it would be okay.
Except for our show is on Zoom, and we call it Radio You Can See. So you do see, but you see everybody in like a medium
Sure.
shot.
Sure.
Right. So, and we have a great costumer. Sean LeBlanc.
So you dress for the Zooms.
Oh, no, we do special effects, sound effects, music.
I'll have to watch
So it's very elaborate, and I would love it if everybody would watch it, please.
Watch it, and let's all watch more Westerns, too.
Yes, but also one more little plug
Okay.
is that our shows, Hollywood Radio Players, a.k.a. Fat Dogs, benefit the Motion Picture and Television Fund.
Terrific.
So all proceeds go to them.
Nice. Let's have a big hand for Lee.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So one of the things that I really like about Lee is the name of her production company, which is Two Fat Dogs Entertainment. And she had told us that it was her and her production partner at the time, or at the inception of making the company, had two fat dogs, but it just paints such a picture for you.
It does. You could think of different graphics that you could use to create a logo. A nice thing about Lee is that she, like when I said she just jumped up on stage to be a participant in the Ladies from Lonesome, the Burt Kennedy live stage production that we produced, she was so hands-on, such a big help. She said, do you need any wardrobe? Do you need any food delivered? Just right there, hands-on, a true professional. And when you see her name out there on a live show, run and stand in line because you want to catch her. She is dynamite. And what is amazing too, she looks the same as she did 40 years ago. And I met her then. So God bless you, Lee. Thanks for joining us on A Word on Westerns. Hope to see you on stage again soon.
Happy trails.
If you enjoy what we do here, please take a moment to follow our show and share these interviews with your friends. You can also find A Word on Westerns on Patreon, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you, and see you next week on A Word on Westerns. A Word on Westerns is produced and hosted by Rob and RJ Word. Edited by Alex Lockett and Bohr and Ebor Dro. Location audio is provided by Richard Reagan. Sound design by Alex Lockett. A Word on Westerns theme song was composed by Karel Pasoda with additional arrangements by Shipwreck Music and RJ Word.